From the guided learning, we're able to see that the function that's going to represent sort of the path of this football is h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 75t plus 6. Before we start using the graphing calculator, let's just go through and kind of make a rough sketch of the path of this football. Now we're only really concerned with quadrant 1 of our graph because time cannot be negative and height cannot be negative. So everything here is going to be positive, so that's why we just need quadrant 1. Now it says that it's a 6-foot tall quarterback and he's releasing the ball at the 6-foot height. So when we go to start drawing the path of this football, we're not going to start at the origin because he's not throwing it from the ground. We're just going to kind of start up a little bit, and this again is just a rough sketch. And the path of a football is going to kind of go something like this. Okay? So now the questions that were being asked, the first one says, how long is the ball typically in the air? So we need to kind of think about what point along the path of this parabola is going to represent the point that we're trying to find. So here, since this is time and this here is height, what we want to do, if this represents the starting point where he throws the football, and it's in the air, in the air, in the air, in the air, and then finally when it comes back down to a height of 0, it's hit the ground. So this whole piece here, this whole span is going to represent how long the ball is in the air. So we actually want to find this point here. Now since this point is on the axis, this is really representing an x-intercept or a 0 of the function. So that's the first thing that we want to find. So let's go to our graphing calculator and let's find the location of this x-intercept. So we're going to hit y equals, we're going to type in our function, so negative 16, and we're just going to use an x in place of the t, and then plus 75x plus 6. And remember, we're going to hit graph next. So now when we take a look at this, you obviously cannot see the top of the parabola. You cannot see the vertex. You can see the x-intercept, but it really doesn't even look like a parabola. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust our window. Now keep in mind when we adjust our window, we really only need to see quadrant 1 of our graph. Okay, so we're going to go to window. So since we're only concerned with really the right-hand side here in that quadrant 1, let's just set our x minimum to, let's just say negative 2. And we could actually see the x-intercept on our graph, so we don't need to change the x max. For the x minimum, we really don't need our graph going down to negative 10 because again, height is not going to be negative, so let's change that to negative 2 as well. And you don't have to change it to negative 2, I'm just choosing to for this problem. Now for the y max, we could not see the top of our parabola. And right now it was set at 10. So let's just try 50 and see what happens. If we still can't see the top of our parabola, then we can readjust our y max again. So let's hit graph and see what happens. So as you can see, we still are not able to see where that vertex is located. So we're going to go back to window. Let's try increasing this to 100 and see what happens. Okay, so now we can see the top point, we can see the vertex, and we can also see the x-intercept. Right now our focus is on finding that x-intercept or that 0. So from here, we're going to hit second and trace. Since we want the x-intercept or the 0, we're going to select 0. Now remember, for the left bound, right bound, you can only use the left and right arrow keys to kind of maneuver your cursor along the path of the parabola. Since this is the point that we're looking for down here, we first want to move our cursor so that it is sitting on that x-intercept. So it's pretty close. You can kind of see it blinking right there. Now when it says left bound, we're going to hit the left arrow key 3 times. 1, 2, 3, and hit enter. Now when the question switches to right bound, before we can do anything, we want to move that cursor back to the x-intercept that we're trying to find. Then we can set the right bound by pressing the right arrow key 3 times and hit enter. And it's okay if you can't see the cursor if it goes off the screen. Now the last part, when the question changes to guess, you need to hit enter one more time. So the location of this 0 or this x-intercept right here is at 4.8 if we're rounding to the nearest tenth, comma, 0. So when it says, how long is the ball typically in the air? Since this here is along the t-axis, this is representing time. So this is in seconds. So to answer our first question, how long is the ball typically in the air, we would say 4.8 seconds. So that is the answer to question 1. Okay. Now for the second question here, it says, what is the maximum height that the football reaches? So again, what you want to do is you want to look at the path of that football and figure out, well, what point along this parabola is going to represent the maximum height that the football reaches. So if we start where he releases the ball, right here is where it's going to reach the maximum height. So this is our vertex. And we want to locate then that maximum height by figuring out where the location of the vertex is. So again, we're going to come back to our graphing calculator. I'm going to clear the history here so that you can kind of follow along. Since we already have our function in the y equals, we don't need to go back through and enter that in again. Since we kind of already hit graph and we adjusted our window so that we can see where that maximum point is, we don't need to adjust our window again. What we can do is we can just jump to hitting second trace. And this time we're looking for the maximum point. So we're going to go down to number 4 where it says maximum, hit enter. And now you can see your cursor blinking back here. So what we want to do is we want to move that cursor as close as possible to the vertex of our graph. And then when it says left bound, hit the left arrow key 3 times and hit enter. When it says right bound, before we do anything, you want to move that cursor back to the top of your parabola. Then we can go through and hit the right arrow key 3 times to set the right bound and hit enter. Now when it says guess, remember we have to hit enter one more time, like so. And then the calculator gives us a coordinate of 2.3, comma, 93.9, again, if we're rounding to the nearest tenth. Now, the question does not ask for the vertex. It asks for what is the maximum height that the football reaches. Since this is our x value, our x coordinate, this actually is representing time in seconds. Since this is the y value, or the y coordinate, this is representing h, or height, and that's in feet. So when it's asked for the maximum height, we want to actually use the 93.9 feet, because that y coordinate of our vertex is going to give us that maximum value. So the max height that the football reaches is 93.9 feet.